So when we look at this transformation process, it's extremely important because at a time in which a lot of our people are calling for healing, this is the ultimate healing. There's a healing that a lot of people need to go through for trauma and issues, many of which are post-68 issues that have to deal with drugs and a whole bunch of things that have hit our communities. And so there's a need for that, and we'll be addressing that on this show. I know a lot of you have been going through various processes where this has been discussed before. But when it comes to the ultimate healing is when we get down deep into who we are and develop a strong sense of African and African-American identity, which generates a strong sense of self-knowledge, self-respect, and self-love. And some people who are viewing this feel that they don't need this, and that may well be true. But in most cases, it's very likely that we all need some of it. And as we go on this identity transformation journey, we have to go deep if we're going to undergo deep transformation. One of the most important, and perhaps the most important gain of the movements of the 60s was the freedom of the mind, which also meant the freedom of the spirit, freedom of the body. Not everyone that went through the movements of the 60s underwent this kind of transformation, but those that did, they had great results. And the proof of the pie is in the pudding. James Foreman, who was executive director of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, explained why some went through this process of transformation and some did not. And his explanation was that some, in the course of struggle, as we were fighting against apartheid in the South or for economic empowerment, Black power, as the Panthers were standing up and fighting against police violence, and as we were raising up movements for Pan-Africanism or African unity around the world, those of us who engaged in study while we were engaged in struggle, which was not easy, which was a study of our history and our past, we were able to draw certain conclusions and undergo certain kind of transformation. And as a result of that, the movements that we led benefited. The movements that people participated in, they got much more from this. And this is as true today with the movements that our people are carrying out today, whether it's Black Lives Matter or the various kinds of organizing that we're doing in our communities. So the depth of the transformation had everything to do with the quality of our identity, the ability of us to really know and love ourselves, and it had a lot to do with the depth of our thinking. And if we were on the mind of the plantation, then we were operating on someone else's thought processes. So this was a key point. Those that didn't study, very often, they got frozen into a particular period of struggle, the struggle that they engaged in. And they may have just then decided to enter the work world or whatever, which would happen anyway. But those that didn't engage in struggle would not have an idea of how their transformation tied into changes in the movement, and would not therefore be able to continually grow. So this was real key. Assata Shakur, who was a major leader in the Black Panther Party, a beautiful sister who's been in exile for many years in Cuba, she explained the importance of this process this way. She said, in the Black Panther Party, we knew more about Mao Zedong than we knew about Frederick Douglass or Nat Turner or Harriet Tubman, or she was saying than we knew about our own history. And this is extremely important. And she's one of those sisters that did her homework. And others did their homework, and they were able to spring her from maximum security confinement. As I've noted before, my involvement in the Black Freedom Movement, first in the Congress of Racial Equality and later in other movements, that involvement in the Black Freedom Movement, I underwent the most important transformational experience of my life, one of the two most important experiences of my life. The second one, and probably even more important, was piping into God's mind, something we'll talk about much later, not today. And that experience was one that we call, now you call it being woke, undergoing awakening. And entering the movement, I didn't know I was asleep. I mean, good miseducation just miseducates you until you're thinking someone else's thoughts and you think you're thinking your own. So the most important value that I got from this awakening process is that I experienced first in the very beginning, the first light of mental and really spiritual freedom. Where on the political plane, I began to think my own thoughts where I thought I was thinking them before. And that was both a humbling experience because I realized that I had been put on remote control. Someone else was, dictating my thoughts while I was doing the talking. And I thought that I was thinking my own thoughts. So the experience of realizing that I had been put asleep while I thought I was awake was humbling, and it was not a good feeling in that I felt like a fool. But the good part of that was I experienced the freedom of thinking for myself and seeing things through my own eyes, something that I thought I was doing before, but was not doing. So then that put me on my journey. And if you look at Malcolm X, Malcolm was a petty criminal. He probably exaggerated how serious the criminal he was, but he had really stepped out of the consciousness, the lessons that he had learned from his family, particularly his mother and father, both Garveyites. And so when he underwent his transformation in prison, he literally transformed his philosophy. I'm literally describing how he's described it before. His attitude pattern, his thought pattern, his communication pattern, and his behavior pattern. He literally flipped the script. It was hard work. And he did that through reading, but also through putting what he read that was relevant inside of him. And I should point out that the most important things that he read didn't come from the prison library that he refers to in the autobiography of Malcolm X. It came from the Black books that his family members brought to him while he was in prison. And those Black books were like food for someone who was literally starving for knowledge and for true understanding of himself. So Malcolm's success as an organizer very much was tied to his consciousness, his transformation of consciousness. Without that transformation of consciousness, we would have never had a Malcolm X or an El Hajj Malik El Shabazz. The same was true of the brother that you've often seen on the show behind me and the sunglasses, Amilcar Cabral, who I think, and many historians, political thinkers think, is the best leader, best strategist, best thinker that was produced in the world in the 20th century. And he led the revolution in Guinea-Bissau and Cape Verde, a little island, Cape Verde, and the land of Guinea-Bissau in West Africa, bordering the country of Guinea. Cabral had been assimilated as Malcolm had, and so he had been put into a mindset where he identified himself as Portuguese, just as some of us who are in the assimilation stage want to identify with being white. And Cabral said it's when he joined a study group in Portugal while he was undergoing training as an agricultural specialist and agronomist. And it was a grueling course, and he was one of the best students in that course. It's during that time that he and other Africans who later became leaders of the revolution in Mozambique and Angola formed a study group. And in that study group, he made this decision. He said, I made the decision to be African, meaning he underwent a transformation through study that transformed him from a white-minded Portuguese-trained African who thought in a Portuguese mindset to an African. And so he could only make that contribution to the armed struggle, where he led the most effective armed struggle on the continent or anywhere in the world, sustaining only 2,500 casualties, inflicting over 50,000 deaths on Portuguese soldiers, and who knows how many Africans who were fighting for them, because they didn't count the dead Africans who were serving their colonial masters. And he laid out the best analysis of how Africans were organized, called social structure, which shows you the ways in which a society is organized. It's done anywhere in the 20th century. W.B. Du Bois's Philadelphia Negro is considered to be the best sociological work of the 19th or 20th century. But I would say that as great as that work was, Cabral's was the most precise analysis of how African people of different ethnic groups were organized in Guinea and Cape Verde. He owed that to this transformation of consciousness. And I can say as a principal organizer and strategist and spokesperson of the San Francisco Freedom Movement, I've discussed this in my first presentation here on Free the Mind, the most successful of the northern movements, we defeated an entire economic power structure. I can say that had I not undergone this transformation of consciousness, there is no way that I would have been able to do what I did, because once you put yourself in your own mindset, you're able to transcend, rise above the thinking of your enemy, and you're able to not only outthink him, but think on another plane, out-strategize him, and whip him. And we had a perfect record. We didn't lose a single battle. That wasn't just due to me. We had some very sharp people. As I pointed out before, one of the key things we did is we buried our egos. And whatever decision we made, it was the best decision. Not for me, not for someone else, but for our people. And I can say that one of the things that this produced for me is not only a deep sense of self-love, which I already had some of, and an ability to think for myself in a creative way, but it also led me into a love affair with my people. John Henry Clark, our great historian, often said that he had a great love affair with Africa. And so do I. But my first love is my people. And what I should say out of my own transformation, that I love my people more than I love myself in the collective. I'm no fool. There's a lot of our people ain't worth loving. Every time the CIA or FBI sent someone to shoot me or kill me, it was a Negro. I know Black people had nothing to do with it, but I don't love them. So I'm not a fool. I'm not saying I love everybody equally more than me. No, as a group, because this group is so beautiful. The souls of Black folks is so beautiful. And I love Africans everywhere, and I love humanity. But my first love is for my people. Of course, above that, I love the truth. I love the truth even more than that. So the transformation for me was key. Without it, the victories would have probably been spotty. But when you know yourself and know your enemy, and you plan appropriately, and especially if you're a good strategist, you have a good chance of being victorious, if not all the time, most of the time. And so far for me, it's been all the time.